Hello there, everybody. I'm Rob Hudson. I'm a partner with the law firm Frost Brown Todd. I'm one of the volunteers for the Northern Kentucky Bar Association. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the NKBA Legend Series. In this series, we interview distinguished Northern Kentucky Greater Cincinnati lawyers. What we hope to do is elevate the profession with a particular focus on what it takes to succeed as an attorney, both personally and professionally. Today's program will be recorded. It'll be made available to help guide the next generation of lawyers in our region. For our live attendees, please be sure to post your questions on the Q&A or chat features, and I'll ask them at the end of the program, time permitting. It's another wonderful event today in our Legend Series because Mark Arnzen is our guest. I'm going to start off by just embarrassing Mark because he has great humility, but so it gives me even greater pleasure to extol some of his virtues and accomplishments, thus making him uncomfortable at the very beginning of the program. Mark is not just a Northern Kentucky legend, he's a true giant in our legal community. He's a past recipient of the Northern Kentucky Bar Association's Distinguished Lawyer Award and Lifetime Achievement Awards. He's a consummate professional. He's a founding member of one of Northern Kentucky's strongest law firms, Arnzen, Storm, and Turner. He concentrates his practice in the areas of professional negligence, commercial litigation, and personal injury. He's handled some of our region's most complex litigation now for more than 4 decades. Throughout his career, Mark's immersed himself in the profession and the community, including service as a board member for Kentucky Defense Council, a board member for our local airport, a board member for Tank, an adjunct professor at NKU Chase College of Law. He's a former chair of the Kentucky Board of Bar Examiners, former president of the NKBA's predecessor, Kenton County Bar Association, and a former president of Salmon P. Chase Inn of Court. Mark checks all the boxes to be represented here today as a legend. We're thrilled to have you, Mark. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Rob. Glad to participate.
Well, we usually and typically begin with our program by talking about the interviewee's background, some of the influences and experiences prior to practicing law that maybe contributed to the type of lawyer you would one day become. Are there a few of those aspects of your background growing up in Northern Kentucky that you care to share with our attendees?
Well, it's always interesting to look back and see how you got to where you are 50 years later. But I had my mother's brother, Art Shue, who is since deceased, and a couple of his sons have now taken over his practice. But he was a creditors' rights lawyer for many years before his death. And when I was very young, he was beginning his practice. And during the times when we would get together, I would always ask him how many criminals he represented the previous week. That's my feeling at the time about the practice of law was that lawyers represented people who violated the law and had to go to court to be tried or to plead. And he would always kind of smile at me and tell me he really didn't represent anybody that week. And I kind of always wondered, what did you really do? But I didn't know enough about the law to ask the right questions. But he was somebody that exposed me to that early on. And the other thing that attracted me ultimately to the practice was my mother was a real estate agent for many years. And back in the day, it was a male-dominated field. And people were always arguing about who earned the fee. I mean, we've represented a lot of realtors over the years and the local association. And really, there's not much of that anymore. But during the day, there was a lot of that going on, and I always, I hate unfairness, and I thought there was sometimes when there was some unfairness with respect to her profession, and that always bothered me. I always thought at the time, boy, I'd like to be able to do something about that, but not realizing that the law would even redress the type of things that were going on. But that always kind of impressed me, and I also I feel that way today. I don't like unfairness, and it's been a driving force. It probably the most significant thing that actually caused me to end up going to law school is I was a business major at Xavier University in Cincinnati, and probably my third year in law school, Mickey Folger, who is a retired circuit judge, and I were very good friends and have remained friends for many years. We both got A's in business law, and I don't know who said it to who, but one of us said, well, we got an A, we might as well go to law school. So that was probably the last step that we that took to get me in law school. But we had a challenge at the time, and it's kind of interesting how this happened. But at Xavier, Vicky and I had to take ROTC for 2 years. It was mandatory, and so when we got ready to graduate, we didn't take it the last 2 years. It was voluntary the last 2 years, so we got out. But during the last 2 years of law school, the Vietnam War was raging, and as soon as you got out of law school, you got drafted. And I went down to the draft board one time to see if I could just bump it back 3 years. I didn't mind going in the military, but I wanted to get law school out of the way. Well, the clerk down there, I think a woman's name was Bernard. I remember it very well. She says, honey, she says, don't even ask me questions like that, because as soon as I get your grades and your diploma, you're going to get drafted. Well, Mickey and I talked about it, and we went down and saw the professor of military science at UK and got him to let us take the advanced 2 years of ROTC, our first 2 years of law school. So it postponed the military. Mickey ultimately got out because they had the voluntary draft. My number was still very high, so I had to go to basic training, and I became a finance officer for a period of time in the military, and then had to serve a number of years in the reserve unit over in Fort Thomas as a officer. And that was kind of a difficult tour of duty because it was everybody I grew up with in Fort Thomas was in that unit. So it was an experience. So that was how I got to law school and got out of law school without getting
and you went down to the University of Kentucky. You were law journal down there. You came home to Northern Kentucky to practice. And what led you to become a litigator?
Well, after my second year in law school, my uncle Art, who was as I mentioned before, was an attorney in Cincinnati, and he was friends with Bob Ruberg, who was a partner with O'Hara, Ruberg, Trill and Osborne. Very good law firm, probably the best law firm in Northern Kentucky at the time. And so I got a job clerking that summer with the idea that I would ultimately go in the military after my last year in law school. And, who knew what would occur after that. But in any way, I worked this summer with O'Hara, Ruberg, and Citrillo in the office I'm in right now. And great experience, great lawyers, great mentors. And I left after the summer feeling good about the practice and what I had learned that summer. And then ultimately there was too many. Richard Nixon started winding down the war, and they had too many second lieutenants. So Doug Stevens, who was with the firm, left, and they needed another lawyer. And I made application, and they hired me. And they were all litigators, and so I became a litigator. None of them did title work. I did a little title work, but not anything of any consequence. So that was my history of how I got to where I am.
As you were a new lawyer, were there, certain pivotal moments or experiences that helped mold and shape you into the lawyer you became?
Well, I saw what good lawyers did. They researched, they worked hard, and weren't afraid to try cases. My first experience, so you talk about disappointments in starting the practice. The first day I walked in, Jay O'Hara, who was president of the Kentucky Bar Association at the time, very good lawyer, Commonwealth attorney in Kenton County. He came in the office probably one of the few times I saw him all summer because he was working with the bar very much at the time, and he had some legal question about easements running under the runways at the airport, and so he just told me the brief facts about the case, what he wanted me to find out, and so he left. So I spent 2 days. I mean, I looked at easements, I looked at runways. I mean, and I was a pretty good researcher. I've done some work with the Law Journal, and I couldn't find anything. And I thought, this is terrible. I'm not going to last a week here. He's going to come back, and I don't have anything. I don't have anything. I wrote some briefs, so I kind of knew how to do it. Not well, but I knew what they were kind of looking for. But I couldn't find anything. And so I was just beside myself for 2 days. I come in the third day, and he comes in the office first thing that morning and says, "You got that research done for me?" And I was about to tell him that I quit, or he could fire me because I'm just so inadequate. And about that time, Jim Osborne walks in. He said, "What's going on?" And O'Hara says, "Hey, I gave Mark issued a research, and we're just about ready to talk about it. It's in that runway case at the airport." And Jim Osborne says, "Hell, I just filed a motion for summary judgment. We don't need to do anything on that." I thought, oh my God, I got a blessing from above. And so the rest of the summer went well. I was able to figure out where the cases needed to be researched and what needed to be done. And I must have done a pretty good job because they hired me after that. But I didn't start off well.
Well, and so many of our legends were shaped by mentors early in their career, and even at midpoints in their careers. Did you have any mentors that you look back on and you have a lot of gratitude for what they did for you?
I think Bob Citrillo Sr. was a great lawyer, great individual, very intense. He and I were friends. I did some work for him after I left the firm and after he left the firm. And but you're touched by everybody you come in contact with, and they were all good lawyers, and I learned something from all of them. They all had different personalities. And as Judge Bartlett said one time, it's almost like in walking down a hallway that's been painted, and you bump into the wall, you get a lot of different paint on you, and that's what you live with the rest of your life. And that's kind of what I experienced. And I had good friends that were good lawyers too. Worked with Bill Robinson. Andy Buzo was a good friend of mine, and tell the story about Andy one time shortly after we start practicing. The question is, how do you become successful? And that was one of the things we're going to talk about here today. But I do recall one time we were at a seminar in Louisville, and we were talking late one night, and we made the comment that Andy, I think, made the comment that there weren't many cases back in the day that couldn't be settled for $100,000. And that was probably true back in the 70s. And so, we had good experiences like that. And I did see something the other day. This one lawyer who does a lot of advertising, he had put out a flyer, and the title of the flyer was "How to Make $1 billion Practicing Law." And I do recall one time there was a book when I first started practicing, How to Make 100,000. And it wasn't really about the money as much as about what you need to do in order to be successful, not just financially, but as a member of the bar and somebody who represents the public. So there's some good people that I work with, work for, and have been associated with over the years who have just been great, including some judges. So it's been a good experience.
Well, and a lot of people talk about work-life balance and how important it is to have that time with family and friends outside the practice of law. But then, and I guess we would both be considered at this point more senior members of the bar. And I'm not sure how the younger or newer lawyers like to hear our stories of how much we worked, because I guess we just sound like I don't know, maybe I sound like I'm out of touch whenever I talk about that. But what was it like as a newer lawyer, say first 5 to 10 years, in terms of the effort that you had to put forth to be to begin to become excellent at what you did? Is it, was it a 9 to 5 job for you? Maybe it was easier for you than it was for me. It wasn't for me. It wasn't a 9 to 5 job by any stretch.
Well, it wasn't for me either. I can recall there were many nights that I worked, and interestingly, Bob Citrillo, who I mentioned before was a great mentor, he would work in the evenings. And so it kind of made it easy. And I didn't work because he worked. I worked because I wanted to, and I wanted to be successful. I never thought about it as being successful, but I had cases that needed attention, and you can get tied up during the day answering a lot of questions and working with a lot of different people within the office. So you needed some time to be able to just research and to think about how you were going to practice a case.
Within the field of litigation, if you could pass on some of the keys for becoming a terrific litigator, competent to excellent litigator.
I think, what I tell, there's Michelle Turner's son has just graduated from law school. Michelle's a great property lawyer and very busy, very competent. But he's coming on board here as soon as he gets through the bar exam. And a couple of things I've said to him is, obviously, you need to go to work every day, and I think everybody that we know does that. I think you need to read the law summaries from start to finish every time they come out. And I never did this, but I've told my son this, who's a lawyer. You probably need to read domestic cases. You need to read the criminal cases, because every case has something in it that will rub off on you and you'll need sometime down the road. So I feel very strongly about that. And I think that's one of the most important things you can do. I think everybody, especially everybody, not just, I was going to say judges, but everybody should have to read the civil rules from start to finish before they have to certify to the Board of Bar Examiners they read the civil rules from start to finish, and including annotations. It might take you, a few hours, but you always remember that. You may not know what to do if a judge dies after you've tried a case, which I've had before, but you'll know that there was a civil rule that talks about that. I don't think as long as you don't know, you can find the answer. The danger in our profession is people who think they know with absolute certainty, and that just ain't so. It's there's something that has changed. So you gotta be on top of that. I think you gotta work hard. You gotta surround yourself with good people, and I think that those type of things. Going to seminars, I think it's important. And today, it's so great for young lawyers because there's so much information out there that's on tape, and it's streamed. You can listen to anything, and you could listen to. A lot of times I'll listen to something when I'm on my elliptical. It's just so great. You can just listen to something. Every time you go to a seminar or listen to a seminar program, you will learn something, and you'll retain it. So I think that's terribly important. And
I like this because it sounds like for you to become an effective litigator, it begins and almost ends too with strong substantive knowledge of the law and the rules of civil procedure and the rules of evidence. And without that foundation, you don't really get anywhere. I've often thought of some other lawyers as, okay, you're just brilliant and gifted in the courtroom. You have this special talent that it feels like no one else has. And perhaps you have that as well, but it begins with the solid foundation, right?
No, I don't have, I, I've had a good education. I'm saying anything about that, but it's just it's the hard work, and it's not that hard, but I always I like to read it. I mean, there's so many cases that are interesting, and you wonder how people got in this fix and how they got out of it and what happened when it ends up in court. It's it's a fascinating profession.
Well, in terms of your style before the court or before a jury, um, it, can you describe it for us?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, Dick Lawrence one time said that I was a master of understatement. And maybe I don't know if that's true or not, but you know, I I think one time I may have thought she got a pound on the table, but you don't do that. But with lawyers or with the court, the courts don't like that. And I think if a judge believes that you're you're kind to the court and the other lawyers and you do your job, they appreciate that. And if there's so many cases, not so many cases, but there's a lot of cases that they can fall one way or another on the fence. And if you get your share of those, you'll have a good practice, and you sometimes you get your share of those falls because of how you've uh, treated other people and treated the court, and so um, I think that's very important.
Well, I like this perspective because I've talked to lawyers before and they say, "Oh, well, I could never be a trial lawyer." But if you think of being a trial lawyer in terms of knowing the law, preparing your case, and presenting the facts in an honest way, I mean, it sort of takes some of the mystery out of being a trial lawyer. It sounds like your focus was on being yourself, being knowledgeable about your case. And I think the more we know, the more flexible we can be as we're presenting a case. Your ability to adapt amidst a trial is enhanced, tenfold based on preparation. But any other thoughts about the trial approach before judges and juries that you think it's made a difference for you in your practice?
I think so. I mean, you got you sometimes you just don't hit it off with the judge, but I think after a while, they know who is being honest with them, and by and large, I had one judge. I had a case, a reported decision went to the Supreme Court. It was on apportionment, and without boring you with all the facts, one of the defendants who should have been in the apportionment scheme, and he didn't put it in there, and it was wrong, and I got hit with the entire verdict. I took it up and went to the Supreme Court. It was kind of the predecessor to the apportionment law in Kentucky today, which was on the books it's been on the books since 1988. But I thought I was right. I went to Supreme Court and was sent it back, and and I don't know whether this is right or not, but I never lost a case in front of that judge after that time, and I had some close questions. So, and the judges, they just they like to, they don't like a bunch of carrying on and people that yell and scream. It doesn't do any good, and the judges, they all try to do a good job. So it's important to to row the boat with them and with the other lawyers.
Well, so you've developed competencies as a lawyer as a young to 5 years in, 6 years in. I don't know whether in your practice, Mark, you had to develop clients from day one, or what the process was for you, how you ended up getting clients, and how you ended up building a practice large enough to have your own firm. How did that happen for you?
Well, it just, I think it kind of happens, and you and I talked about it, and it takes a little bit of time. When I start practicing, you could try small cases, I think the first case I tried was probably a $300 property case in front of a jury. I had a couple of those over the years, which was great experience. You don't get that today. So, that was one thing that I did. And I had a lot of, I grew up in Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati. I went to, Xavier High School and Xavier University. So I knew people in Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati. And, I would help people out with different matters. And I tried worked on collection cases for some of my clients. And eventually, I was hired to represent their companies and their families. And I think it's just, being exposed to people and doing a good job. And it's, I don't know if it's as much you want to get good results, but people know who has their interest at heart. And if you have their interest at heart and try to work hard, you'll be successful. And I think, one of the things that is difficult sometimes, I heard a lawyer one time said it's better to represent cold business than hot business or warm business. When you represent people that your entire life, you feel more of an obligation and a need to try to help them and to do a good job. And so that was one of the things that always was difficult for me. A lot of people that I represent are people that I've known for a long, long time.
And so, there's so many different ways to go about building business. You could immerse yourself in pure community service or join business organizations if you want to be a business lawyer. But it sounds like most of your work then came from relationships that go back away, from word of mouth. And as you developed as, a better and better lawyer, your practice grew kind of organically. It sounds like.
It did. And the other thing too, I practiced law with Bill Robinson for a long time, and I know you did too, Rob. And Bill was, he was into every imaginable thing. And that was a little bit of a contention with us a little bit at times, but he made a point of doing things good for the community and for the bar. He's president of the KBA, he was president of the ABA, which is unbelievable for somebody from Erlanger, Kentucky. But he was great at what he did. And so I got exposed to some of that. I got to know lawyers from Lexington and Cincinnati and Louisville. And I've tried legal malpractice cases in Lexington and Louisville, representing clients, not just in Northern Kentucky. I've done a lot of that over the years. But and that's always difficult to represent a lawyer in a malpractice case. So that I got involved with a lot of bar association functions and what have you.
Well, and looking back on your career, I know you're still practicing, but there are certain moments, and this is maybe not the best descriptor, but king of the world moments or learning experiences that were just off the charts for you. I know litigating cases for 40 plus years, you got to have lots of good stories about cases and how they affected you and how they helped you become a better lawyer. I just wanted to turn it over to you, maybe to share some of those with our attendees, because we'd like to preserve some of those stories for, again, the next and future generations of lawyers in our region.
I have a couple. Lawyers are great storytellers. You got a lot of things that you've been involved with over the years, and there's always something to learn from trying a case. But I had a couple of things that happened to me early on, which I think are well worth mentioning. One of them was I represented this family shortly after I had been practicing less than 10 years, and this fellow was hurt in a vehicular accident down in Bullitt County, Kentucky, outside of Louisville. And they came to see me, and I'm not sure how they got to see me. I just don't recall exactly how I got them as clients, but they were very nice. They had 5 kids, and the trucking company ignored them. And so I had to file suit in Bullitt County. I should have got local counsel. I didn't. I talked to a friend of mine who was down there, but I went down there, and you can imagine somebody from Northern Kentucky coming to Bullitt County to try a case. And the insurance company hired the county attorney and his son to be the defense counsel in this case. So I'd have my clients come up to see me on a weekend to get ready for trial, and I'd come in at 9 o'clock, and they were parked in the back parking lot with their kids. They slept in the car all night so they could get up and be here at 9 o'clock. Just good people. And so the last witness I got ready for trial was a fellow that was a before and after witness. And I got asking him questions about his testimony. And shortly after I started asking questions, he told me that I didn't have to talk to him about this anymore because he was Buford Pusser's first assistant down in Tennessee. And for the audience, Buford Pusser was a sheriff down there who cleaned up gambling and prostitution in Tennessee area down there. And so he was, he spent a lot of time in trial. So I felt pretty good about that. So we go down the first day of trial. And of course, I told Rob this story, so he's hearing it again. But first day of trial, we pick a jury, have opening statements, and I put my clients on. And so the last question of the day for Mrs. Rowden, the injured plaintiff's wife, was, how long have you been married? Now they had 5 kids, from age 17 to 2. And she says, oh, we just got married last week. And this lawyer, I don't know if he knew the answer to that or just what, but he jumped up, demanded her consortium claim be dismissed, and the judge, of course, accommodated him. He almost broke his gavel on the desk, striking my client's pleadings and dismissing her case. Well, that was a long ride home from Bullitt County that night. I mean, I felt so bad, so bad. So the next day we go down, and I put Buford Pusser's first assistant on to talk about how he knew my client and what my client couldn't do that he could do before the accident. And he answered the questions right, but there was just no sex appeal in the case, just kind of bland. So the other lawyer I asked him how many times he'd been hunting with Harlan, and he wasn't really sure. And when's the last time, he went to dinner with him and all this. So he asked questions like, when was the last time you were hunting? When was the last time you went to dinner with Mr. Rowden, and he would answer the question, well, I'm not sure. So the last question of the day, the second day of trial, was, doesn't sound to me like you know Mr. Rowden very well at all. He said, well, I guess I don't. So another long day ride home from Bullitt County. Next day, we give jury instructions. And by this time, I got all the jury instructions, 10 pages of jury instructions about how you operate a motor vehicle when you don't do this, and you don't do that, and how much money you get for pain and suffering and medical expenses. He says, Mr. Arnzen, he says, down here, we don't do what you do up in the big city. We give the jury 2 pieces of paper. One of them we find for the plaintiff in the amount of blank dollars, signed by the foreman, or we find for the defendant, signed by the foreman. I said, Judge, that's all right. Now, not a problem, because at the end of the day, I've come to learn you can give all the instructions in the world. When the jury goes out, they by and large know how they're going to vote, and they maybe change their mind, but they've got. That's all you really need to ask of a jury when they go out: who should win and who should lose. So anyway, I said, that's fine, Judge. I didn't realize that at the time. I've come to learn, I believe that to be the case. And I don't get too worked up about jury instructions. You got to have them because you can get reversed if you don't do them right. But at the end of the day, you're going to win or lose a case by how you impress that jury during the course of trial. Okay, so the last day of trial, now I got to get ready for closing argument. I kind of worked on the night before, but I just felt bad because I've got beat from pillar to post. And I had a law clerk, Larry Barry, who's now an FBI agent. He drove me down every day. And last day of trial, I read the newspaper all the way down while he drove and read everything there was, all the current world events, Dear Abby, everything was in the paper. And you can't make this up. The last thing I read in the Enquirer, the day I was to give a closing argument, was, you will win, this was my horoscope, you will win a significant legal battle today. Well, that kind of pumped me up a little bit. I gave a better closing argument after I read that than I would probably given one that I would have given before that. We got the largest jury verdict in the history of the county at the time. So the idea, what I learned from that, which I think is a very salient point for trial lawyers, is, the juries, they ferret out insignificant things. There was nothing. I mean, the fact that she wasn't married, there was no idea of trying to get money. They knew there was some kind of legalese that prevented her from going forward, but it didn't prevent them from doing justice and giving the money that this guy was deserving. And they didn't get worked up about the guy that didn't know when he went to dinner with my client. They knew he was hurt, and they did what was right. So that was a great lesson that I learned, and I tell that story to many young lawyers, and I've told it to many young lawyers over the years. So that was a significant case.
And I understand that, and I don't know when you started to do this, but maybe it was earlier on than most. But your use of conducting focus group studies, and laying your case out for a group of individuals in the community, just to hear their thoughts on where you're heading. If you can share with us some of what you've learned through that process.
Well, I think what happens is, and I learned this early on. The first case I ever tried, I was all wound up. I was working nights, and I came home one night, and my wife knew I was going to trial the next day, and she said, "Well, what's this case all about? I got it all figured out. I'm going to win this case." And so I told her about it. She said, "You're going to lose." I got upset with her. I said, "What are you talking about?" But she was right. I mean, I just flat out, I missed it. And I think focus groups are great in that regard, because there's things that come out that we get so wrapped up in some of the minutia that you don't know what, the jury's going to do justice. What do they perceive it to be, And so I think focus groups are very good. And I've, you don't always get them right. One time I had a focus group. I was representing some lawyers up in Warren County in a malpractice case, a bad case that I can't remember exactly what the lawyer did. It was some commercial case, but something should have been filed. It wasn't filed. And the jury they didn't like it, but I couldn't get the thing resolved. And it was so bad, I told the jury to give the plaintiffs $250,000. The jury came back with a defense verdict. So you don't know. I mean, it's not bulletproof and 10 feet tall, but it gets you an idea of what would be persuasive to a jury.
Yeah, and the idea that we win cases that maybe we shouldn't win sometimes, and we lose cases that we shouldn't have lost, through no fault of our own. I think that's part of what we do.
And you try, and you try your good cases, and you try to get your bad cases settled, and you got to try the cases, just do that. And so things generally work out.
Well, as indicated in your introduction, you've spent so much of your career in service of the profession, bar associations, and the State Bar Association as well. You've been an adjunct professor, I believe, at Chase, right?
Yes.
I assume you presented on trial practice, or you taught some.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Well, if you would just share with the attendees and with the future viewers, what the commitment to the legal profession has meant to you in terms of your service.
Well, you like to. I mean, he liked to help people experience some of the things that you've experienced and try to maybe do things a little differently. And I think, now I was with a firm. I probably, it'd been nice. I think I tried my first malpractice case, medical malpractice case, probably in the early 80s. And, it was, I was Frank Benton, who was another good lawyer in Campbell County. I tried it with him, and he was very helpful. And I just think that if you can share with people, whether it's through being an adjunct professor or even being a bar examiner. Everybody says, "Oh, bar examiners, they do this and do that." Bar examiners, they're not looking to fail anybody. They'd like to pass everybody. That was my philosophy, and I think it was shared by most people that I worked with for the good many years I was on the board of bar examiners. So you kind of want to share with people and give them some ideas similar to what we're talking about here today.
What was it like being president of the Inn of Court? I've never been involved with the Inn of Court, and have conducted a few of these interviews now, and it seems like one of the things all of our legends who are litigators have in common is praise and appreciation for the Inn of Court. It must have been a high honor to be serving as president.
Oh, I didn't want to do it. Tony Froelich, who was the judge at the time, wanted me to do it. And, it's hard to, if a judge asks you to do something, you generally do it. So I did it. And it was a good experience. And really, we would have meetings every month or every quarter. I can't remember exactly what it was, but we had one meeting every year, end of the year type meeting with this Cincinnati Bar Association, and we put on a good program. And there was the program that I had was kind of interesting because there was this case that it was called this Army captain had killed his wife and 2 children. And he ultimately was convicted 10 years after this all happened, and he's still in jail today, and he's probably my age. But I had the prosecutor come up to Northern Kentucky and speak to the Inns of Court, and I'd heard him speak at a seminar one time. And it was very fascinating for him to tell the story, because this book, it was the Jeffrey McDonald case. It's been on TV, and great book, Blind Justice or something. And the author wrote about it. And actually he lived with Jeffrey McDonald for a period of time when he was going through all this. And originally the book was written that he did believe Jeffrey McDonald was innocent, but changed his opinion after many years. And so, the Inn of Court was a great thing. We'd have a speaker every month talking about different things. Some storytelling, which is always great, and some lectures on different aspects of the law, which was good. So I think it was a great organization, and I think most people enjoyed it very much.
Did you find during your career that, especially as to your bar involvement and your involvement in the professional activities, did someone at some point just say at the very beginning, suggest to you that you go join a committee or that you get involved in something, and then did one experience lead to another and then lead to another? Is that part of how things developed? Because, when you start out as a new lawyer, you ended up holding these what I would consider to be higher level leadership positions in the bar. How did it all start out?
Well, as I mentioned before, having been associated with Bill Robinson, I kind of, he was much more aggressive with those type of things than I was. But to Bill's tribute, I mean, he got me involved in some things at the bar level, and I always enjoyed him. I mean, I was on the inquiry commission, which is fascinating. I mean, it's like a grand jury, and determining whether somebody should be, the charges should go forward, and you have a hearing. But it's pretty interesting. I mean, being a bar examiner, I was reasonably young, and I thought, this is going to be kind of fun, But it was, again, it was work. I mean, you had to read, 150 exams in February, and whenever the bar July, I guess, for the July bar exam, and then a lesser amount at mid-year. But it was, it all came pretty naturally,
What are some of the professional responsibility and legal ethics issues that you've identified through the years as being more significant or substantial? In your practice as a litigator or within law firm management that you participated in now for decades?
Well, I think obviously, I mean, I think a lot of lawyers, young lawyers, get in trouble with escrow accounts, attorney-client privilege, breach of confidentiality. I think those type of things, very, some of the things that we see, I mean, are just grossly wrong. I mean, and there's no question somebody's going to get disbarred or a 5-year suspension, but there's a lot of things that people get in trouble for that is things that are just they haven't been exposed to them. Now, in law school today, they have ethics. We never had ethics when I was there. It wasn't even on the bar exam. But over the years, it has been. So I think there's a little more attention given to that, but there's a lot more lawyers today. And so, there's a whole lot of ways to get in trouble, but if you read the rules and you pay attention to it, some of it's really common sense and doing the right thing.
One, in terms of words of wisdom to pass on to other lawyers as to professional responsibility and legal ethics, does anything come to the front of your mind in terms of how we treat one another, how we present ourselves as lawyers?
Right. And I mean, I've had my share of disagreements with people where I'm embarrassed of getting upset or what have you. But I mean, civility is great. And the really good lawyers, and the one that comes to my mind at the top of the list was Leo Breslin. He was a lawyer with Lindhorst and Dryden in Cincinnati. Great lawyer. And you could go, I went in some depositions with him and what have you, and people would, I mean, they'd say nasty stuff and act ridiculous. And when it was all over, Leo would offer to shake their hands and ask them what time we're going to start in the morning, and never let it get to him. And I mean, there's people that you'd like to copy their good traits, and Leo was one of them. He's a good lawyer, a good litigator, nice guy, and never got rattled, regardless of what anybody did. And we all should do that, because it doesn't make any difference. You're not going to get any better breaks, or you're not going to make anybody do anything differently by getting mad. And that's easy to say, but sometimes harder to do.
The Bar Association over the last couple of years has been focused in part on wellness for lawyers. We operate within a fairly stressful profession, and sometimes it's hard to maintain work-life balance. So any words of wisdom on the subject of wellness you've tried cases all these years. You've remained active, healthy. How'd you do it?
Probably, luck, good genes. I think
Some
that's
luck.
probably the best thing. I spend more time paying attention to working out. It just makes things easier. If you don't take care of yourself, eat right. And I probably eat too much and drink too much, but probably uh, set that off a little bit because I do try to work out. I try to work out every day. I don't get it done every day, but I do spend some time at that, and I think it's important because if you can do that, it takes a little bit of tension off and makes things easier.
Well, did you just start recently doing that, or was that something that you had begun to do earlier?
I always thought about it because I played athletics in school and everything, but one time I decided, and I had a little bit of not a medical scare, but a medical issue that came up and turned out to be nothing, but it was a little bit alarming to me. And I never forget, I decided on October 1st, 1994, that I was going to work out on a regular basis. And from that point on, I started out working out 3 days a week. And I had a doctor friend tell me when he retired, he had much more time to work out. And I've adopted that also. So I try to.
Did you say 1994?
1994, 30 years, it'll be 30 years.
30 years.
It'll be 30 years next year. And I've once you do it, you kind of get, it becomes a habit. And once it becomes a habit, you feel bad if you don't do it. So I think that's important. And
well, I think
especially in our field.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good advice for wellness purposes. So what do you think have been some of your big successes outside the practice of law?
Oh, I mean, I'd love to say my golf game, but I play golf quite a bit, but if I hit as many golf balls as I shot basketballs when I was a kid, I'd be a scratch golfer today. But I never picked up the game till later on, and when I did pick it up, I had a lot of bad habits, which I still have today. So I'm relegated to being a 15 to 17 handicap. Probably not going to get any better.
I don't know, 15 to 17 handicap doesn't sound too bad to a lot of us.
Yeah.
So we talked about you working out, you're a golfer. Are there certain things outside the practice of law that you enjoyed that have helped you with balance in your life?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been into, I got into a little bit of banking. I was on some bank boards, which is, when you're a lawyer, you're exposed to so many different things in life, which I think is the greatest thing about being a lawyer, because you get business and employment matters like you do, Rob, or, I'll have somebody with a medical problem or a banking problem or a legal problem, or somebody has bad a septic tank. I mean, it's amazing what you're exposed to, which most people, if they're a salesman or a credit manager or something, they're so focused on what they do that there are all these other areas that we have to deal with on a regular basis, and it's nice to be exposed to that.
I mean, particularly as a litigator. I mean, if you're handling all sorts of commercial litigation, there's no telling what the next thing you're going to be learning about is.
Oh,
you add up those cumulative experiences over 40 years, and you've got a base of a lot of useful knowledge and maybe even some useless knowledge too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And some of it, you never see it again. But again, it's something that's always there, and I think it helps you in a lot of different areas.
Well, Mark, you've led a fairly public life, but there's probably something that not a lot of people know about you that might be interesting. Some childhood experience or some interest later in life that you'd consider to be unique. So I always try to ask the legends, share something with us that's unique that a lot of people might not know about.
Well,
if you would.
Yeah, here's a story. I mean, there's a lot of them, but this one's kind of interesting, and it has a little bit some spillover into what we all do. Okay, so in the early '80s, we were looking for a house, a little bigger house. Okay, and this house that I'm in today was owned by the editor of the Enquirer for probably 20 years. That was Brady Black. And he lived in this house on Dixie Highway, where I live now. And he sold the house in the late 70s to a fellow by the name of Luis Pinto. And Luis Pinto came to Northern Kentucky with about 8 or 10 kids, no job, bought this house from Brady Black and did some remodeling of it. And everybody liked him, liked the kids, liked his wife. And one day at 7 o'clock in the morning, 25 police cruisers show up in his driveway. And they had AT&F, the FBI, state and local police, and he was arrested for laundering $10 million through First National Bank, Covington Trust, and People's Liberty Bank. And, he was obviously involved in some kind of drug deal. And he, first thing that happened, shortly after he was arrested, his brother-in-law, somebody who was a senator from Bogota, was shot and killed in Bogota. Okay, I don't know whether it was coincidental, but he was killed. Okay, so ultimately, Luis Pinto went on trial, and he testified against 2 drug lords from Miami. They were convicted. And after the trial, the federal government was going to put him in a witness identification program, and he declined. Shortly after he declined, he went to Florida, and they shot and killed him. And then I bought his house. Okay, so this was back in the early '80s. Okay, so you can imagine, there was always something on TV about it. My kids were young, and they'd say, our house was on TV again, and it looked scary, and so anyway, I got 2 plaques on the entranceway to my home on concrete.
I think that it's definitely pretty high up there on the list of items shared by the legends in this series.
One of them has 1870, the other has Arnzen. I want to make sure everybody knows who lives in this house now. But the sequel to the story is this. Okay, the following week, or a couple of days after I bought it, it was in the paper that I bought the house. A week later, my wife calls and says, we're getting audited by the IRS. Okay, so now I've never done a criminal case in my life. So Jay O'Hara was a Commonwealth attorney, Bob Ruberg was juvenile judge, and Bob Citrullo was U.S. magistrate when I first started practice. So I knew nothing about criminal law. So I knew nothing about Pinto or the thing, but obviously the government did, because they came in and they demanded to see 2 years of my taxes before I bought the house. They demanded to see the tax return for the year I bought the house and 2 years thereafter. This went on for 5 years. Okay. And it made me very angry, because I wouldn't talk to the IRS agent, because he was saying, what'd you do with this account, with this money? Blah, blah. So this went on. It cost me $5,000 in professional fees with my CPA, because I didn't want to talk to the IRS agent. But after all this happened for 5 years, the federal government owed me $100. I owed them nothing. They owed me $100. So that's my story.
We're nearing the end of our time together today, and just wanted to provide you with a last opportunity today to share words of wit and wisdom with the future and next generations of lawyers in our region.
I think, they say that people don't like lawyers, but everybody loves their lawyer. Okay, and that's true. If you do a good job and you're kind to people and treat people with respect, you'll do well, and people will like you. In regards to make jokes and everything else, but it's a great profession. I've enjoyed it, And, I think if you do a good job and work hard, there's great chance of success. And I think you'll enjoy it.
Mark, thank you. This is just what this kind of program is just what we hope to achieve through the Legend series. We're very grateful that you'd share this with us today. Thank you.
I'm glad to do it, and good luck to all the attendees.
Well, I wanted to also offer, as we wrap up, special thanks to our live attendees today. We appreciate your support. Our extraordinary executive director, Julie Jones, is going to be sending out CLE information for ethics credits. We want your suggestions for future programs. We know that at the NKBA, we're always better when we collaborate, work together. Everybody have a terrific day. Mark, thanks again. We appreciate you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.